and welcome to this meeting of the Employment Committee. As usual, the meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. The link is available on the Council's website. Can I please ask all members and officers have their microphone on mute until they wish or are invited to speak, and that officers show their camera only when presenting reports, although we have no officers online this morning. So we do have apologies from James Poland, and I know, from Peter Bedford, and we have James Poland substituting. We also have apologies from Mr. Harrison Rushton, and obviously we haven't heard of Mr. Pendleton at the moment. So thank you to all the other members for being here. Item 1, firstly, we need to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of December 2024. These are on pages 3 to 6 of your agenda pack. Are members happy there, true record? Yes, okay, thank you. Item 2, question time. I've received no questions from members of the public. Item 3, questions asked by members. Again, I've received no questions from members. Item 4, urgent items. I have not been notified of any urgent items to take for today's meeting. Item 5, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest in respect of any items on today's agenda? No? Okay, thank you, members. Item 6, I have received no petitions, so I'll move to item 7, which is our first substantive item on the agenda, which is our workforce update 24-25 on pages 7 to 12. Obviously, Lucy's here today as well, joining us, and we've also got Andrew Stewart, Head of People Services. So I'll hand over. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will be taking the lead on this presentation, if that's okay. So this workforce update presentation follows on from previous discussions at Employment Committee about expanding the data set, not just talking about absence, to try and talk about the wider issues related to the workforce and the context that we have going on within Leicestershire County Council. Could I have the slide moved on, please? So the first slide, you might recognise this from our people strategy because we originally populated this in the 1st of January 2024, but what we've done is repopulated it based on what the current position as of the 1st of January 2025 is. We currently employ a headcount of 5,845 people, and this includes those people working in ESPO and EMS on LCC terms and conditions of employment. For things to, and I will go into a bit more detail and in a further slide a little bit more, but the main point to note is around the age demographic of the workforce and the information captured around where our workforce is, where there's no information as part of that, because that presents some of the biggest challenge that we've got within the workforce information that we capture. Can I have the next slide, please? Following on from that, this is just a representation of the headcount in terms of what we've seen in terms of over the last since January 2023 in terms of reduction in headcount, and also the changes within full-time equivalent. So that's FTE, which so one FTE is equivalent to 37 hours worth of contract from that perspective. We have seen a bit of a jump. So just to explain that, little bit of a quite a significant drop was related to a TUPE that happened within the workforce where 76 headcount moved out of our organisation. What it shows is that whilst our headcount has reduced, we have maintained our FTE across the workforce, meaning that we're seeing more full-time workers within the workforce and more part-time workers taking on additional hours within the workforce itself. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is a summary of what you would normally get with regards to absence, to try and distill and give you the high-level figures to try and take it into a more strategic level discussion to talk about where the absences are happening, i.e. which departments they're happening in, why the absences are happening, so the reasons for absence around the different types of categorisation of people recording absence as part of that. And then we were looking at whether that's short-term or long-term absence, and then looking about the total cost of the organisation. To give a little bit more context around this, as of year to date in 2023-2024, we were at 9.27 FTE. We're currently at 8.5. FTE, which suggests that we are on track to achieve a reduction of approximately 0.77 FTE across the year, which represents about 500 K's worth of cost avoidance in absence. When we've looked at this to check that if it's statistically significant, we can see that we've reduced since December 2023, December 2024, we have seen a statistically significant reduction in sickness absence totaling of 0.5 FTE. So we can see the interventions that we put in place have reduced absence by approximately 0.5 FTE across the whole of the organisation. Can I have the next slide, please? And then this goes on to a little bit about the equality and diversity to understand where are there shifts within our based on protected characteristics. Overall, we are not seeing any deterioration in our performance with regards to capturing information, but what we are seeing is a shift to and I'll go on to this in my next report around the gender pay gap. We are seeing a little bit more of a shift towards the male workforce and more full-time working as part of that. It does also say that we're also having a little bit of shift but towards higher age, but that's not necessarily statistically significant from that perspective. But it does show some improvement in the data that we're capturing against protected characteristics. Could we do better? Yes. And that will be the focus of our work for going into 2025, 2026 from that perspective. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is the first time that we've done this in a different way to try and provide you that strategic view in a different way. We are looking at what the format of this to then does this give you what you need in terms of assurance as an employment committee, and any other ideas in terms of areas that you'd like to go into, i.e. APR that relates to appraisal, turnover rates, statutory and mandatory training and appraisal spend. Some of this we are already planning as part of this work, but we just haven't necessarily got the data in the format that we'd like to present it to you at this point in time. We are planning to do a pack of information on to go into your packs every employment committee, but what we're suggesting to do is do a deep dive each quarter based on the 4 elements of the people strategy, that one being recruitment and retention, which you're hearing about today. There's also the learning and development and leadership offer as part of that. There's performance management, and then there's organisational culture. So it's then theming each employment committee to have a little bit more of a deep dive so we can have a different discussion on an annual basis from that perspective. So that concludes my my presentation, and it's open for discussion and comment now, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. I mean, certainly I found the slides a lot more user-friendly. I think certainly what I'd like to see. So I think we've requested that, and I think they're certainly a lot more user-friendly. I'll open it up for questions. So I'll take Richard and then Barry, and then I'll take Linda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with you about the presentations. Very helpful indeed, and I like your ideas for the future. I shan't be here to see them, but nothing again. But it sounds good. It's always, of course, a jolt when you see the total cost of LCC of absences. So obviously bringing that down would be great. And could you perhaps clarify, or maybe remind me of, honestly, the difference between prefers not to state and no information?
Prefers not to state is a category that we have where if a member of staff has cancer, say for instance, and doesn't necessarily want to disclose that on their employment record because someone else may have visibility of it, we can record that. No information is where there is no information captured against the reason for absence. And that, if Andrea were here, who would normally present on absence, she would say that we've been doing work to try and avoid that category being used, because that is just not necessarily good practice. That indicates that the process isn't being followed correctly.
I just wondered, Chairman, would it be feasible simply to remove that category?
We can always ask the question, and I can come back to you with an answer on that with that regard.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's always been, normally if you fill a form in, at the end of it you get the inclusion diversity, and sometimes that form is longer than the actual questionnaire that you've actually filled in as a form. But I know some people don't like ticking boxes and stating their sort of inclinations and preferences, but it's okay. Thank you. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. I think the way the report's put together, it's very easy to pick up the information, especially like on the first page, how many employees we've got, that kind of stuff. When you come down to like the attendance metrics, I think the previous reports were quite heavy because they had a lot of information in there, but at the same time, there was also information in there that was quite useful. And in fact, I think it was probably myself going back probably a couple of years has asked for some of that, where we broke down, say, each department and how the different reasons for absence are for each department. And the reason for that was to see how different departments suffer, because obviously stress and depression is the highest level of absence. And certain departments will suffer from that more than others because of the work that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that information is very useful for us so that we can see what departments have the biggest problems in certain areas. And if there's anything, I think when I first started talking about this probably a couple of years ago, is that to try and differentiate between the stresses that people suffer from what they're dealing with outside and the stresses that they suffer from working here, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to deal with what stress we create. And then there's only the stress outside we have no control over. I wouldn't really want to see this report get thicker because I think it's quite nice as it is, but as an appendix possibly, or a link that we could drop across to whenever we felt like it, to have a deeper dive into those figures would be quite useful.
So we have a BI, a business intelligence dashboard that does all that for you. So the idea being is that as and when you require that access, we can go through that with you rather than produce a data table, because what I'm looking to do is give you assurance at this level. And then if you want to go into the detail, we could probably have a discussion outside of this, but the data is there because we're still producing it. It's just trying to reduce the amount of pack that you get, and then if something does you spot, oh, I've got a bit of a concern, you can then come to us as HR and we can go into that detail rather than provide it at committee every time. From that perspective is where I'd prefer to go, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd suggest maybe just once a year that comes through to the committee. Well, it just gives you that overview, just so you get a feel for what's going on.
If we suggest that that's included as part of our performance deep dive, absence is deep dived, and we provide that detailed level of explanation once a year.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Linda.
Thank you. Committee feedback, I'm going to try and fit my question into there. The complaints procedure that, and it's really following on from whether it's the stress is caused by work or by home. Can we possibly at some point have some data on how quickly complaints are dealt with? And I mean, I know that there is a timetable for dealing with complaints, but it's not always possible to complete them in that time for whatever reason. And I would like to be able to see data on how quickly complaints are dealt with, and if there are any that are ongoing for a long period of time, because that is would cause stress to somebody.
So that we'll look to deep dive into that in the organisational culture. We talked about grievance and resolution.
I couldn't think what the word was off the top of my head.
So what we would be doing is the number of grievances, where they're occurring, and how on average how long are they taking, and where is our longest grievances to be investigated.
And that's the data that I would like to see, because I do think it follows on from whether the stress is internal or whether it's external things that are causing it.
Just to give the committee assurance as well, we're looking at the staff survey, the biannual staff survey that's due to come in to happen this year. One of the questions we're asking is the questions does talk about have you ever had stress at work, we are asking a qualifying question in addition to that. We're putting that forward to then say that, has that made you feel unwell enough to attend work? Because we want to be really clear about what is normal stress that you would expect to motivate you to do the job, and what is that it's made you feel unwell enough to not attend work, from those kind of things. So that's also will be captured as part of the staff survey report that you should get at some point this year.
Well, that would be very helpful, but also how long a complaint and the reason why it's gone on past the past the notice that normally people would expect. Thank you.
Okay, Lucy.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Would you actually be interested in some of the other kind of I don't know, disciplinaries, performance management cases, so that we brought the suite in terms of, I guess, the level of HR activity to a certain extent that related to employees. And again, if you understood that by department, that might be quite interesting. So again, you can spot trends, possibly, can't you, of there's a higher number of grievances in a certain area or discipline or performance. Yeah.
Yes.
So we
that would
brought
be
out the
helpful.
suite. Yeah. Okay.
James.
Thank you.
You're next, Richard. Okay.
Me, Chair. Yeah. Quick comment on sort of the reasons for stress and whether work and non-work related. I sit on the ESPO committee, and that is the sort of level of detail that we get there, and it is quite reassuring actually, because we see that this comes through, and the thing that consistently comes through is that actually work isn't the reason for the stress, and it's external factors, and kind of reassuringly actually we get told that sometimes they come to work as a sort of an escape for things that happen beyond. So it is interesting, and as I say, as a member, certainly isn't in that sense quite reassuring. So I think it's probably a good idea, as colleagues have said. Just a quick one, I'm obviously new to this committee, I'm only subbing. 73.5% of our workforce are women compared to just over a quarter men. Is that usual to have that sort of disparity in local government? Is that to do with the type of jobs that we have, or I'm just interested in why there's quite a big disparity?
I'm happy to respond to that question. It relates to the social care element of this in terms of care provision, and also a large proportion of our workforce is through school foods, which are traditionally part-time female workers providing support while their children are at school, kind of thing. So that's where we tend to find that we struggle with the gender pay gap, which I will go on to at the lower levels as part of that, because some of the nature of our work attracts that kind of workforce.
Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I just realised, of course, my suggestion of removing an information is rather a practical idea, because so many people just don't tick a box. That's isn't no information. So what I'm trying to say really is, be good, wouldn't it, to encourage people to at least say, prefer not to say, rather than just simply leave the box empty and leave you wondering.
We can definitely pick that up as an action.
Okay, thank you. I think the only comment I had on your age groups, obviously 44.5% of the workforce is within 15 years less of reaching retirement age. What do you class retirement age as? I mean, it used to be 65. I mean, I'm 66, my wife's 67 retirement age, and it varies. There is no mandatory retirement age now. So what figure do you use based on that?
65 is the
65
is the traditional.
All right.
Because that's when people can access their pension without it being actuarially reduced.
Okay. Right. So obviously, that was something you've raised there, and you've obviously highlighted in the report. So there's obviously a lot of skill and expertise there, but at some point that migrates out of the organisation, and obviously, those new skills migrate in. So it's okay. Any other questions, members? No. Okay, thank you. It is. I mean, to me, I can see sort of Lucy and Andrew's influence in the new way of presenting the data, which is a lot cleaner and a lot easier to read. So, and obviously, deep dives will give us that sort of look at more data behind what we're seeing here. So, thank you very much. So we're asked to note the update provided on the workforce 24-25. So, thank you. Item 8 on the agenda, our second report, is the People Strategy Update regarding recruitment and retention, pages 13 to 16 of your agenda pack. And Sharon Devlin will present the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to update the committee on the progress made in relation to recruitment and retention projects, which form part of the council's people strategy. So Andrew presented to yourselves the most recent people strategy in May. And just to remind you that the people strategy is divided into 3 main themes, them being workforce and culture, leadership and management, and also performance management. And recruitment and retention falls under the workforce and culture theme. So just to give you just a bit of a background, and recruitment and retention has been identified as a key challenge for the council, and in fact it is one of the risks on the corporate risk register. There are a number of business as usual activities which support recruitment and retention, so it's not just the people strategy projects, but just a couple of notes in terms of we have noticed that the increase in recruitment incentives across all departments. Traditionally, it used to be mainly in professional areas such as engineering, but actually in recent years we've seen a real trend for recruitment incentives in our frontline services, waste operatives being a really good example. Under paragraph 7, I provided just a small amount of data then. I just want to point out a mistake in the data actually. And the data does illustrate that compared to in 2023, job adverts were attracting more applicants and turnover has decreased. So actually the 11.5 average number of applications per advert should be in the 2024 line. Okay. So in terms of progress to date under the previous people strategy, there were a number of projects that were concluded and implemented, and you have a number of there for you to see in the report. So we implemented a career grade scheme guidance. So this has helped very much in those areas where we are finding it hard to attract experienced professionals, and it really helps to grow our own, and a number of those schemes have been successful. We did revise our recruitment and retention incentives policy. So we broadened it out so it wasn't just market premium payments. We could also provide retention payments and golden hellos as well. We were conscious that we were quite dependent on interviews for our selection. So we provided some selection methodology guidance, which really encouraged managers and raised awareness about other selection methods such as tests and psychometric tests. We also promoted flexible hiring as part of the recruitment process. I think existing employees are very much aware of our commitment to flexible working. We wanted to extend that to potential candidates. We also introduced CVs as part of the recruitment process. Managers still do have the choice whether to go for CVs or the more traditional application process. We have seen, and that has been successful in a number of service areas. And lastly, we implemented a new recruitment system known as ORC, which is the Oracle Recruitment Cloud and forms part of our Oracle Fusion system. Okay, so that was the previous people strategy. If we can turn our attention to the current people strategy and the projects that we have in year 1, and I've listed those there, so I will go through those briefly. So the first project that we have completed is in relation to values and behaviours. So an awful lot of work has been done in recent years in consolidating our values and behaviours for the existing workforce. We felt that there was a gap in terms of really promoting those within our recruitment process, and we felt it was important for for prospective candidates to actually be aware that we hold these values and behaviours very integral to the organisation. So what we've done is we've made them far more visible throughout the recruitment process. And you will now see that these are represented on the careers website and in job adverts and the job description. We have produced a resourcing project work template, which is for internal purposes, and it's really when a service is experiencing quite significant recruitment and retention and difficulties, it really supports a deep dive into that area. So it provides a bit of a checklist, if you like, for HR advisors to look at a number of things and to ask the right questions of managers. So it might be a case of services and would like to look at the careers website. Maybe we need to improve their visibility online in terms of jobs, or maybe it's a case of looking at career grade schemes. So it's kind of looking at all those different aspects of recruitment and retention. So we have 2 further projects which are still in progress. The first one being the ORC evaluation. So as ORC has been in place now for 2, nearly 3 years, we thought it was a good time to see how that was going. And as part of that, we will be looking at all aspects of the system, including the data relating to the number and also demographic of applicants, and also time to hire, which is a key factor within recruitment. And then the last project, which is still in progress and going well, is around recruitment and retention data and reporting. This is a bit of a gap for us at the moment, so we felt that this is something that we really wanted to improve on. And the outcome of this is that we will managers will be able to self-serve via the Fusion dashboards. So using the Oracle system, they have a number of dashboards. We have developed a recruitment one where recruiting managers can go into and they can see and their data relating to their own recruitment activity in terms of number of jobs they've advertised, how many applicants, so on. We will also be providing DMTs regular, consistent and comprehensive data regarding their recruitment activity. And that data will inform where we need to focus on in terms of improvements. So again, it will look at things like turnover, number of adverts, number of applications, time to hire. So that's year 1. We are soon approaching year 2. April's not far away, is it? So we are looking at year 2. And our intention was to look at some more long-term projects within recruitment and retention. However, I think what we have realised is that there are some issues that we need to address, not just within recruitment, but I think across the HR service in terms of our processes. And what we would like to do is we'd like to really kind of take stock, go back to basics and really resolve the issues that we have with our processes. So we have launched a project called Fix the Fundamentals within the service, and it's going to be looking at 3 different aspects. It's going to be looking at our processes. So we have feedback from managers and feedback from ourselves in terms of some of our processes are quite clunky. We're still using Word forms, that kind of thing. So we want to really make those processes user-friendly and more streamlined. We also want to improve our intranet so our managers and employees can self-serve more. At the moment, there can be quite a lot of improvements, I think, to be made in that respect. And the third aspect is a customer journey. There are lots of different ways that managers can access HR. We don't feel that it's the most straightforward kind of approach. So we would like to simplify that really to improve that customer experience. So in terms of that project, we are going to be undertaking that project within current resources, and therefore we will be looking to prioritise some people strategy projects. And in line with this approach, this will be communicated to senior managers and departments. So Any questions or comments on that report?
Yeah, I have Linda, then Barry, then James. So Linda.
Thank you. Going to be a bit long-winded. We all know that using agency staff costs a lot of money. Rutland County Council, some months ago, decided to get rid of all their agencies in adult social care as such, and those that were sponsored to reduce the costs. They then set about saying, we will sponsor you and you were employed by us. With the sponsorship, they have to remain for 5 years anyway. But obviously they're not paying the agency fees, and they're not, yes, from a staffing point of view, they're getting a little bit extra, and they've got a bit more security because they're actually working for a council. Do we offer anything like that? I'm just thinking that by doing it, they have managed to save quite a lot of money on agency fees and things like that. It also, when the staff come, because they're having a better experience than working for an agency and might not get the hours or whatever, they tend to stay. So with recruitment in mind, it could be another thing that, if we don't already offer, that we offer to encourage these people, because looking, at the figures of male to female, and the ages of them, we do need to be able to recruit people into those positions. And are there many younger people want to do that type of work? It's just a thought that I'm putting out there to you, really.
It's something that we're doing more of, absolutely. And within Children's, I think about 18 months ago, they undertook a project where actually they sponsored a good number of social workers, overseas social workers, and that really improved their vacancy rates and their agency costs. So it's something which we are doing more of, and we're getting more experienced at, because as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of complexity around those sponsorships. But yes, I think it's a really good point, and I think any way that we can reduce agency costs, I think we need to explore more. Absolutely.
Sorry, so you said that you've done it for, sorry, can I come back? You said you've done it for social work. Do you do it for others, like care assistants and whatever? Because that is the main, yes, we need social workers, I'm not denying we don't, but a lot of the work is done by care assistants or people working in supported living, that type of thing. Do we do it for them now, or is it a thought to be able to do it?
We do that through, if we have an overseas applicant, we then, and they are successful, we then explore the sponsorship route. It's just that, it depends on the job role, and lots of things around salary and things, whether we would actually get sponsorship for them.
Sorry, just as a final, I'm just thinking that people that want to come can't really come without sponsorship, so therefore it would put them off applying for a position if they thought that sponsorship wasn't something that could happen. I mean, I will explain, obviously I care for my daughter, and one of the carers that do come in used to be live in Australia. She's a fully qualified nurse, but she's doing care here on a sponsorship with the company that I use. And a few of them that I had come in have actually left and gone to Rutland County Council because it's better, it's more stable for them. And, I just think, given that experience, I thought if it was something that we could do, that we do here, which would save agency costs, and some of the staff, they're not just somebody that hasn't had experience, they have a wealth of experience, which would be useful for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's always interesting. The thing I always work with work is that everybody goes to work just to get paid. And if you enjoy the job as well, that becomes the bonus. So when it comes down to looking at recruitment and retaining, obviously pay is going to be the primary thing that people are thinking about. Now, I know from outside of this organisation, other areas of people work in the council and they've got agency workers and they see these people doing the same jobs as themselves and often paid a lot more money for doing that same job. And that becomes a disincentive then. And that becomes an incentive actually to think, well, I'll stick around a year or so and then I'm going to go agency myself. And I know of people that have been said, you know, do this for a couple of years and then come and join me, you'll earn a lot more money. So I think, you know, following up from what Linda's saying with agency, the less agency people you have working in an organisation, the more stable you'll create, stability you'll create for your own people, because they don't have them people around them earning sometimes twice what they're earning, as an example, to do the same job. So I think it's quite an important thing to look into when it comes to retention is that what's going on around people is what's making people think, oh, I might shoot off.
Can I just yes, absolutely. And I think we are starting to do more around retention. I think there are lots of benefits being an employee of Leicestershire County Council. You know, being the pension, development, flexible working. So I think that's a really good point. And we need to carry on with those messages around retention and why we are a good employer.
Okay, thank you. James.
Thank you very much. Got a couple of questions, if that's okay. First of all, in terms of the, you mentioned in the presentation that we're moving away from sort of straight interviews to a wider sort of suite of options. I think that's something I'm supportive of, and I just wonder how that is. How we I put my tongue back in. Neurodiversity is something that I've sort of come across quite a lot in my sort of previous working life, and it's I think it's important that we sort of there's an awful lot of talent there that maybe doesn't come through the traditional route. So really, my question is, what do we do as an organisation to sort of encourage people who are neurodiverse to apply, and what sort of support do we give them going through the process to make sure that we get the best talent we can? That's the first question. And the second question, something different, if that's okay. Obviously, it's public knowledge we're going through the local government reorganisation. We're not on the fast track, but it's nevertheless coming. With that in mind, how do we think that might impact recruitment? Because obviously, you know, if I'm honest, if I was an employee and I'm looking for a long-term career, you know, that would be something that would be in my mind as to whether I'd be in a job in a year, 2 years. Do we anticipate that's likely to be an issue? And if so, how can we sort of address that without the logical conclusion of going to agency staff with all the issues that Barry's just highlighted?
Okay, so in terms of your first question, I think that neurodiversity is gaining a far higher profile across the council, and managers are more aware of those issues. Within our recruitment process, when we invite candidates to interview, we ask them, is there any reasonable adjustments, anything that would help us to kind of support them through that process? So I feel that we are getting better in that regard, but I still think there's more to do, absolutely. In relation to your second question, it's a real difficult one, isn't it? And we often talk about this tension between us promoting LCC as an employer up against the necessary communications around our financial position and local government reorganisation. So we will always have that tension there. I think it's a really good question. You know, will it affect us in terms of recruitment and retention? It may well do, because, you know, instability, change, but I think we just need to keep pressing on with our messages around us being a good employer, and also focusing on retention as well.
Okay, Lucy, and then I'll come back to you, Barry.
Yeah, but just coming on both of those to build on, I guess, Sharon's responses. So from the neurodiversity, then I think there's definitely more we can do. I think people would be we're still quite traditional. Whilst we've moved to CVs, we're still quite traditional in the way that we recruit. You know, you'll have seen the John Lewises of this world who've started to kind of, you know, produce a set of possible questions that people might get asked for, and that's particularly relevant for, you know, people, neurodiverse candidates, who it just allows them that preparation time, because actually, you know, it's not a memory test, is it? An interview, and it, you know, and being able to perform on the spot isn't everybody's bag, and not many of us, like today, have to perform on the spot, do you? Do you know what I mean? We have time, don't we, to research and to consider things, and I think we definitely do need to look at, particularly around certain roles, about actually, you know, what's the nature of this role, not doing that one size fits all, I think, in terms of our actual recruitment process. I also think we maybe in some cases have too high expectations of the type of experience that we ask people to have. If you see some of our job adverts, then we're maybe trying to be too picky in the first instance, and particularly for younger people, where do they get that experience from nowadays? You know, somebody's got to give them a start, isn't it? And we need to find ways actually of being able to support the local community as well, and give people those opportunities. So there's definitely more in that space that we can do, as far as I'm concerned. LGR is interesting, I think, for current staff, depending on what role you're in. You may be feeling, and you can't take this away, maybe feeling more vulnerable, possibly than in others, where you know that maybe there's going to be some duplication, possibly with other councils, and that may stir some retention issues, I think. And also, when we're, you know, as a prospective candidate, you do look at those kind of things, because nobody likes the instability, do they? So 100%, I think it will affect us. It's almost a shame we aren't on fast track, because I think sometimes, to do the changes and get it over and done with to a certain extent, and it's just going to give us maybe a little bit longer in terms of that instability, but equally time to prepare, I guess.
Barry.
Thank you, Chair. I think picking up on the neurodiversity thing, I think is quite interesting. So at district level, I remember they produced a whole process of the interviewing process, how to help people with neurodiversity. What they hadn't actually looked at is what roles they were going to give people. Now, I'm very familiar with people on the autistic spectrum, and I mean, to give you an example, I knew someone that went through fine art because they loved art. They did extremely well on the art side, but they did very poorly on the write-up side, so they didn't come away with a good degree. Now, the job they would have been absolutely perfect at is you could have given them a painting and given them a needle and said, pick away at this varnish for 5 years, this priceless painting, don't damage it, and it'll come out perfect. And they could do that, and we couldn't sit there and do that for that long, but they could. But they couldn't get that job because they didn't have the degree in fine art. So until we start to look at the roles that we're doing, because these people are able to do things that we can't do, and we're not picking up on that, and we're not using that. And I think it's very important not just to think about how we can help people to be recruited. I think we really need to look at the roles that we've got and see there are just some roles that are really suitable to people, and they'd have a thoroughly enjoyable job in doing so if we put more thought behind that side.
I think there's something about potential, isn't there? And we're not very good at assessing potential within our recruitment process. So that is something which we have recognised, something that we would like to look in the future.
Isn't it MI5 that actually they actively recruit neurodiverse individuals? Because of the way that their brain works is absolutely spot on. We haven't got, but we have very analytical roles within this organisation, which would be absolutely perfect. But you're right, there are some individuals would just not be able to even pass the shortlist.
I think the problem is that because we keep labelling this as learning difficulties, and in fact, I think what we have to look at is just learning differently. And if we did that more, I think people would fit in. And the numbers, when you look at the numbers that are going up of people that have SEND, etc., I think we have to start recognising there's a whole batch of people out there that could be really useful. And I think we need to pay more attention to that.
I certainly agree with that. So, okay, thank you. No more questions. The committee is asked to consider and note the action taken so far and the future next steps outlined in the report to address the challenge of recruitment and retention. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your report, Sharon. Item 9 is the pay gap reporting on page 17 to 30 of your agenda pack, and Andrew is going to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to present the initial results regarding the gender pay gap reporting for Leicestershire County Council. This is a report for the 31st of March 2024, and we have a legislative requirement to publish these details by the 31st of March 2025. So this is coming to you as the Employment Committee to make sure that you're happy with these prior to them being published on the government website from that perspective. We've also, for the first time, bringing the details regarding the pay gap data for ethnicity, disability and sexual orientation. We know this is not a legislative requirement at this point in time, but we know from the Employment Rights Bill that this is potentially coming from that perspective. So we just wanted to give the committee an oversight or a bit of a flavour of what does the data say from that perspective going forward. Headlines essentially is that we have seen we are seeing an improvement from our previous performance in that currently we are reporting a 7% mean pay gap and a 5% median pay gap for gender in this quarter, which is a reduction. We have seen quite a statistical fluctuation and variation. It goes up and down, up and down. The only trend where we've seen it respond positively is in the upper quartile for gender, where that is consistently going up to show more equal distribution from a female perspective from that perspective. But as I indicated in my workforce report previously, we have seen a reduction in 76 headcount in this financial year, which relate to school foods, which is predominantly a female part-time workforce. So we anticipate that some of the results are potentially skewed by that data happening as part of it. We haven't got much data to benchmark with against other councils at this point in time because of the data requirement is due to be published by the 31st of March 2025. We are expecting more and more councils to publish, but we've shared with you in an appendix what we can't do now at this precise moment in time from that perspective. And we are looking at what the data actually says for the disability, sexual orientation and ethnicity, because we are seeing similar but different pay gaps emerging for those workforces. Given this is the first time we're publishing, it's interesting to note from that, but we can't necessarily draw any complete conclusions because we'll need to be testing those assumptions, i.e. LGBTQ seems to have a higher proportion, there seems to be more people with LGBTQ protected characteristics receiving higher pay, but it's an assumption that we need to check is that it's more likely that someone from an LGBT background with lower pay, less likely to disclose their sexual orientation as part of their employment. We can't verify that information, but those are some of those assumptions that we need to test out with regards to those points of view. So we're bringing this today to validate that. I also wanted to draw the committee's attention to the support that we do give with regard to supporting women to progress within employment, in that we have got the Springboard and Spring Forward training program specifically target to bring forward female leadership as part of that. We celebrate International Women's Day, and we are currently the menopause friendly public sector employer of the year 2024. So we have got a good record to try and show our support in that regard. So I am happy to, I think I've closed down what I wanted to in terms of highlights. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I mean, certainly the Supporting Women in the Workforce is a good read as to what we've done and what we're achieving. So I will open up for questions. I've got Barry to start with and then James. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I always think it's difficult with this because the figures are so skewed depending on what kind of roles there are and the fact that we have predominantly female workforce working there. I suppose the main thing I'm really interested in is just as clarification. Do we have any instances in this council where we have male and female workers doing the same job and earning different money? Because that's probably the critical thing. We can't control how many people are working in, as you say, part-time, what suits different roles, different genders, etc. It just really comes down to that we don't have any discriminatory pay across the whole board between men and women, between various groups, etc. And if we haven't got that, then at least I can sit comfortably and feel that we don't have a problem in that respect. Then it just comes down to, and I mean, we're doing an awful lot to encourage women to be in the higher quartile, etc. What are we doing to encourage more men to join the lower quartile, which seems to be the thing that's skewing our figures? Because if we had a lot more men working in that area, we probably wouldn't have the skew. So thank you, Ted.
So happy to come back on the first question. We do operate the Hay job evaluation system, which is our main point around making sure that it's equal pay for equal work, and we do that job evaluation litigiously with regards to any roles that come forward. So whilst I can say we haven't got anything currently, we do actively look to try and see if there is anything, and when something is brought to our attention, we try and redress that with immediate effect. But to give you assurance, I'm not aware of anything within the organisation at this current point in time.
James.
Thank you. It's always interesting to sort of read through these reports. I was on a similar committee at Charnwood in a previous life, looking at similar reports, and it's always come back to what I call the so what factor. It's interesting to read, but are we reporting on it for its own sake, or what are we learning, I guess, from this? And I guess it links in again to what sort of Barry just said then. So in terms of male versus female, are we including one of the issues we had at Charnwood, which is where my main experience was, that a lot of the lower paid male dominated jobs of bin men, for instance, right, were not contracted out, so weren't included in the figures. Are we including all of these sort of, even the sort of contracted roles that maybe would maybe help with the sort of the balance of it to give us a more accurate picture? So we're looking at apples with apples, for instance, or are we including sort of the lower paid traditionally female roles and not including equivalent male roles, if you see what I mean? So that's the first question. Second sort of link question to that is, to what extent do we control or have influence over some of this information? So again, we come back to the thing that Barry said about sort of the lower quartile being predominantly female role, females predominantly going for care roles and so forth. A lot of those factors are going to be external. So, in terms of the roles that women traditionally want to go for, things like part-time working for childcare and so forth, that maybe just that are beyond Leicestershire County Council, are just endemic in our society. So to what extent do we have control over that? And I guess as a wider thought, maybe not to more of a debate than a question, I suppose, will be, to what extent when we talk about other factors, so BAME, for instance, to what extent is that a result of the fact they are BAME, and what extent is that to do with social deprivation more generally? So if you included, two people living on the same street in a council estate versus two people living on, in a millionaire house somewhere, do you see what I mean? So to what extent are those sort of issues, and are we focusing on a characteristic that doesn't tell us the full story? But again, I guess more of a debating point than a question.
I'm happy to come back on the point. We don't employ bin men, so that's partly why I'm a workforce with male distributed work, male dominated professions, we don't have them within our workforce. That may change with local government reorganisation to bring them in as part of that. I think my main point to you as the Employment Committee is that it's to note where we're at in terms of our position and what do we do. It's the so what factor. So what are we doing to improve it? So it is the springboard training programs. It is the making sure that we're promoting our leadership qualifications to all protected characteristics, because what we can see from this report is that in some protected characteristics, it does play a factor into whether or not you are in a higher paid role or not. But what are we doing as LCC to support or equal the playing field from that perspective? So it's really to the other protected characteristics is a new and emerging field that we're looking at, but that's something we're hoping to develop within our year two. Working on the EDI strategy that the council has to try and support from that perspective. And then it's just making sure that you're aware of where we're at with our equal pay gap, so that, and I can tell you a sensible story as to why it's the way it is and what we're doing to support and distribute the pay more effectively from that perspective.
I appreciate that, and thank you very much for the answer. And I think very much doing the courses, the leadership courses, and is a really good idea. I know I used to work for Leicestershire Police. They did that. My wife went on a similar course there, and that was a great experience for her. Sisters done one at universities before now, and I think we had one at Charnwood as well. So I think it's a really good idea, and it's something I'm very much in favour of. I don't know sort of how the one at Leicestershire County Council works, but as a sort of a slight shout out, I would encourage us to not exclude sort of men from that process, because they've had a wonderful experience, and that's a fantastic thing. But I, for instance, as a man, have never had a chance to go on a similar course. Now, maybe I've just not been in the right place for that, but do you know what I mean? Nevertheless, men will also want sort of the ability to progress as well. So I think it's important to sort of to have that equality. And I know that's certainly something we did at Charnwood. I think we did it proportionately to the workforce.
So can I come back on that point? I totally agree. It's about making sure that, but I think what this report shows is we've got a gender imbalance, and we need to do a little bit more for the female workforce than the male workforce. So whilst we have a training course that's of access to all, we would need to do a little bit more in the way that we promote it to our female workforce, so that we're making sure that they're more aware, so there are more people coming through from that perspective. So it is the access is there for everyone. We're not preventing, but we do need to give these people a step up to support them in a different way. So totally, and I agree with what you say from that perspective.
Okay, thank you. Good questions. It is an interesting report. Are we just being sort of, we're not going to cause ourselves any problems by when we publish this? We're publishing things that we're not obliged or legally requested to publish. You said there was extra strands in there that we are publishing.
So the majority of councils are starting to publish this as well.
All right. So, and then the only other one is, I was just curious, I mean, I'm a bit sad really, paragraph, the equality and human rights implications and other impact assessments. It was just interesting, gender pay gap is about sort of equalities. It was just interesting, it reads, each department within Leicestershire County Council has also completed the equality and human rights impact assessments at least once since 2014-15. That's like 10 years. I just wondered whether we'd actually done them more recently than that, and whether it says results from these have also not highlighted any specific concerns, and therefore there are no equalities and human rights issues to address. But obviously all our departments form Leicestershire County Council, so it was just I read the small print and I just thought, hopefully we've done them before then, but this report brings them all together with the works that you do. But it just seemed to be an interesting date since 2014-15. So
I will pick that up and have a look at that to clarify that point for you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you. No further questions. We are asked to note the content of the report and support the publication of the gender pay gap data by the 30th of March 2025. Members happy? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for the report. Our final report, item 10, is the organisational change policy and procedure action plans on page 31 and 36 for your agenda packs. And Damien Buckley, our Democratic Services Officer, will present the report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present the committee with an update of the current action plans which contain provision for compulsory redundancy and details of progress on their implementation, and the two appendices set out the current action plans and ones that have been completed. Members are asked to note the report and the appendices. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. Any questions? No. So therefore we will note the update provided on the current action plans, which contain the provision for compulsory redundancy and details of progress in their implementation. Everyone happy? Thank you. Okay, item 11, as mentioned, we don't have any urgent items, so that just leaves me to say the date of the next meeting, whether we're all here or not after the next local elections, will be held on May the 22nd, 2025. Thank you for attending, and I'll close the meeting. Thank you all. Thank you.